Have you ever wondered how the graphics work in RDR2 and why it still looks better than half of all games released today? Since Rockstar released it, graphics technology in games has made several big steps forward. But why is it that RDR2 remains the benchmark for what a realistic and living open world should look like? To understand how Rockstar achieved this, let's break down the main technologies used in Red Dead Redemption 2. The first thing you notice when you start RDR2 is how smooth and cinematic the picture looks. This impressive visual smoothness is achieved thanks to the technology of Temporal Anti-Aliasing, or TAA. It provides smoothing of the edges of objects, which makes the picture almost flawless, without annoying flickering and jaggies on the edges of objects. TAA analyzes several previous frames and smooths them out to get rid of defects, providing maximum detail with almost no loss in quality. Almost because TAA has its drawbacks too. It can cause motion blur, ghosting, noise, flickering, and does not handle transparent objects and fine details well. And yet, despite all the shortcomings, TAA remains one of the most popular anti-aliasing methods in games. Temporal anti-aliasing also helps minimize an effect known as texture noise. For example, fast camera movement often causes artifacts that can spoil the impression of graphics. Thanks to TAA, RDR2 manages to cope with these problems, maintaining high image quality even in dynamic scenes. This is especially noticeable on the grass and tree leaves that sway in the wind, and each object remains clear and detailed. The shadow details in Red Dead Redemption 2 deserve a special mention. Shadows in the game change depending on the position of the light source, be it the sun, the moon, or lanterns. They are dynamically rendered, reacting to changes in lighting. Clouds can block the sun, and the shadows will become softer, reflecting every nuance of the weather. When the light source loses its brightness, for example, the sun disappears behind the clouds or a lantern begins to fade, the shadows gradually become less sharp and more blurred, creating a smooth dispersion effect. This helps to convey the atmosphere and changes in the environment. That is, if before the shadow was clear and clearly visible, then when the light intensity decreases, it begins to become softer and dissipates, losing its contours. This creates the illusion of natural behavior of light and shadow as in real life. This level of elaboration of shadows allows the player to feel the dynamism of the world, where even such seemingly small changes as the movement of clouds affect the perception of the surrounding world. A complex system of shadows allows shadows to intersect and overlap, creating natural transitions and adding depth to the scene. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game that not only impressed with its technology and the detail of the world, but also showed how deeply the player can be immersed in an interactive narrative. Such games fundamentally change the idea of the possibilities of modern development and inspire other studios around the world to new creative approaches in design and creation of game worlds. And if you are wondering how you can even start your path in creating such masterpieces, then the Skillbox platform offers an excellent opportunity to get acquainted with the basics of game development. With the help of the free mini-course, Who Are You in the World of Game Development?, you can plunge into the world of game development and find out which profession suits you best. Over the course of 5 days, you will go from an idea to the implementation of your first project. A Mario-style game that you can add to your portfolio and invite your friends to play. All this under the guidance of experienced mentors and in pure practice, which corresponds to the Skillbox methodology, where more than 70% of training is practical work on real tasks. Join the mini-course, Who Are You in the World of Game Dev?, to develop your skills and learn to create games, which may change the industry, just like Red Dead Redemption 2 once did. This is your chance to start your journey in one of the most dynamically developing areas, where technology and art are intertwined. To do this, follow the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. Well, perhaps the key element of the visual magic of RDR2 is light, fog, and clouds. In general, in principle, all the lighting in the game is inspired by the works of artists of a certain Hudson River school. And in the game, you can notice these rays of light refracting in the clouds, or realistic foggy dawns, just like in the paintings of this school. Moments like sunsets and sunrises create a special atmosphere, where every ray of sunlight refracts and disperses in the air, giving scenes a picturesque depth. Creating volumetric clouds is not an easy task. In real life, clouds are made up of millions of tiny water particles, which refract and scatter light. RDR2 uses a method called ray marshalling to simulate clouds, which allows you to create realistic volumetric clouds, each particle of which reflects light according to the laws of physics. This helps create a dynamic cloud system, which changes depending on the weather and time of day. Thanks to this, in the game, you can see how the clouds gradually accumulate before rain and then disperse when the weather clears. In addition, the game takes into account the height of the clouds and their density, which allows you to create different types of clouds, from light cirrus to massive thunderclouds. All this creates a stunningly realistic atmosphere, where you feel the scale and depth of the sky just by looking at the horizon. Well, if you are just a human guy and like to walk in foggy weather, then this is especially for you. Volumetric fog is another important element that gives RDR2 its unique visual style. It is not just present, it changes dynamically depending on weather conditions and time of day. A 3-channel map is created for the fog in the game, which takes into account height, density, and dispersion. As a result, we see how the fog beautifully falls on the ground in the morning hours, gradually dissipating during the day. An interesting solution was the combination of global and local fog, which allows us to achieve natural scenes when the fog, for example, covers only lowlands or bodies of water. All this helps to feel every change in the weather and environment. For example, when you are on the shore of a lake, the fog can spread along the surface of the water, creating the feeling of a cool morning. During rainy weather, the fog becomes denser, which makes visibility limited. It is also worth noting that the fog reacts to lighting. The light from Arthur's lantern or streetlights can shine through it, creating a beautiful diffused light effect, which softly bends around objects and adds even more realism to the scene. RDR2's lighting is perhaps one of the most complex and impressive solutions used in the game. Unlike most games of the time, Rockstar used not only static lighting, but also dynamic lighting, which allows for realism. The game uses global illumination technology, which allows light to spread and reflect off many surfaces, creating soft transitions between light and dark areas. To create volumetric sun rays, cascades of shadow maps are used, which work in conjunction with cloud and terrain shadow maps. This means that the sun's rays not only illuminate the world, but also interact with every detail of it, be it a cloud, a mountain, or a tree. Thus, each tree branch or rock ledge casts its own shadow, adding depth and realism. In addition, the light in the game is scattered even through fabric or leaves. Evening scenes when the sun breaks through the curtains or simply illuminates the characters' faces with a soft, warm light look really cool. Water physics is one of the most difficult to implement, but Rockstar did it at the highest level. Water in the game reacts to everything that gets into it, be it a person, an animal, or even a stick of dynamite. At the same time, water has its own refraction and caustics maps, which adds realism when interacting with light. When the player sails on a boat, you can see how the waves react to every movement of the oar. And when Arthur fords the river, the water flows around his feet, creating realistic splashes and waves. However, water is one of the most resource-intensive graphics elements in RDR2. So many simply turn off almost all of its simulation immediately after entering the game, without having time to enjoy its development. Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the first Rockstar games to use full physically based rendering. PBR. Let me explain what this gives us in terms of graphics. All materials in the game, from metal to wood, react to light as they would in real life. The interaction of light with surfaces depends on their properties: roughness, gloss, and reflectivity. For example, the leather on a saddle, wet after rain, looks different than in dry weather, and the gloss on Arthur's revolver becomes especially noticeable in the light of a fire. All this adds a sense of believability, and the player feels that every object in the world of RDR2 has its own character and history. Each material in the game, be it fabric, metal, or stone, has its own texture and reflections that change depending on the lighting and environmental conditions. In short, thanks to PBR, scenes in the game look natural. Light interacts with various surfaces as it would in real life. For example, the wet surface of the road after the rain shines and reflects light. Wooden buildings look matte and slightly rough, and the leather element of some of Arthur's vests will be moderately glossy, conveying the entire texture of the skin. Such attention to detail makes each object in the game unique and realistic. One of the reasons why the characters of RDR2 look so alive is the use of the Euphoria engine for procedural animation. I had a separate video about Euphoria on the channel, but since we have a video about technology, I will tell you in detail. Unlike the classic ragdoll physics, where characters turn into a ragdoll after falling, Euphoria models the skeletons of the character's muscles, and also adds an element of self-preservation. Thanks to this, when Arthur falls, he tries to soften the blow, and does not just fall helplessly to the ground. In addition, the bullet physics engine is used to assimilate solid bodies, stones, trees, and objects. For example, if a rock rolls down a hill, it will leave a trail behind it, and the lasso rope is a physical object that interacts with the surrounding world, such as cacti or snow-covered fir trees. One of the key elements that makes RDR2 visually rich is dynamic tessellation. It allows you to create interactive surfaces such as dirt or snow that react to the player's actions. For example, Arthur's footprints in the snow remain for a long time, and dynamic tessellation is also used to create indentations, for example, in the mud. For example, when Arthur's horse walks through the swamps, you can see how the ground beneath his hooves bends, leaving deep tracks. This creates a sense of weight and interaction with the world, where each step the character takes leaves its mark. And thanks to a deep understanding of the interaction of light, shadow, materials, and physics, the developers from Rockstar created not just graphics, but a full-fledged simulation of the world, where each element interacts harmoniously with others. And this makes RDR2 not just a game, but a real demonstration of how these technologies can be used in the gaming industry. As a result, every second spent in this world feels like part of a cinematic journey, where the player becomes the director of his own story. No, that's it.